They told me I'd be dead within a week. The Vryleth don't keep human prisoners for long. We're too unpredictable, too dangerous to their precious order. But they didn't execute me. They did something worse. They assigned me to Princess Kyraeth's guard detail, and every Vryleth soldier who heard the order looked at me like I'd already died. One of them, a scarred veteran with 3 service ribbons across his chest plates, actually whispered a prayer for my soul. That's when I knew I wasn't being punished. I was being disposed of. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what she was to them, what she became to me, and why I'm the only one who stayed when the palace burned. The war had been over for 6 months when they dragged me into the Imperial detention facility on Viral Prime. We'd lost badly. The human colonial fleet had been shattered across 3 star systems, and those of us who survived the massacre at Kepler 442 were divided up like spoils of war. Some went to labor camps on the outer mining colonies. Others disappeared into research facilities where Vryleth scientists studied human aggression like we were lab animals. I got lucky, they said. I got assigned to the palace. The Vryleth Empire spans 47 systems, and every one of them bends the knee to the Imperial bloodline. They're a proud species, tall, slender, with skin that shifts through shades of blue and silver depending on their mood. They value control above all else. Emotional discipline, logical thought. They built their civilization on the principle that passion is weakness, that desire leads to chaos. For 3,000 years, that philosophy made them unstoppable. Then they had Kyraeth. I first saw her from across the palace training grounds, and I didn't recognize her as royalty. She wore simple combat armor, not the ceremonial robes I'd seen in propaganda broadcasts. Her skin burned a deep, angry violet, a color I'd later learn meant barely restrained fury. She was demolishing training drones with her bare hands, moving so fast her form blurred. Each punch cracked metal, each kick sent sparks flying. And she was screaming, raw, wordless sounds that echoed off the palace walls. "That's her," said Commander Velrith, the officer assigned to explain my new duties. His skin had gone pale blue, the Vryleth equivalent of fear. "Princess Kyraeth, 3rd in line to the throne, your charge." "My what?" "You will serve in her personal guard. You'll accompany her throughout the palace. You'll stand watch outside her chambers. You'll ensure no harm comes to her." I stared at him. "You want me, a human, an enemy soldier, to protect your princess? We want you to survive as long as possible." His voice was flat. "The previous guards lasted 3 days, 2 days, and 4 hours respectively. Perhaps your human unpredictability will prove useful, or perhaps you'll simply die more slowly. Either way, it solves a problem." He didn't explain what problem. He didn't need to. The princess destroyed the last drone and stood breathing hard, her shoulders heaving. Then she turned, and even from 50 meters away, I felt the weight of her gaze. Her eyes were solid black, no pupils, no whites, just endless darkness that seemed to drink in light. She looked at me for exactly 3 seconds, then turned and walked toward the palace without a word. "Report to her wing at dawn," Velrith said. "Try not to die immediately. The paperwork is exhausting." They gave me a small room in the servants' quarters, a set of plain grey uniforms that marked me as palace staff, and a security band around my wrist that would electrocute me if I strayed from authorized areas. No weapons, no armor, nothing but the clothes and a single instruction: stay close to the princess and don't touch her under any circumstances. That night, I lay on the narrow bed and tried to understand what I'd gotten into. The room had a window that looked out over the capital city. Towers of crystalline metal stretching toward 3 small moons. Transport ships gliding silently between buildings. Everything ordered and perfect and cold. I'd been in dozens of war zones, survived boarding actions and orbital drops in close-quarters combat that left me deaf for days. But I'd never felt as trapped as I did in that clean, quiet room. I thought about Martinez, my squad leader, who'd gone down with the Valiant at Kepler. I thought about Chen, who'd held the line long enough for the rest of us to evacuate before a Vralith beam weapon turned her into ash. I thought about all of them, and I wondered what they'd think if they could see me now, a guard dog for the people who killed them. But I was alive. That had to mean something. Dawn came cold and blue. I reported to the princess's wing as ordered, and found it empty except for a single Vraleth servant who wouldn't meet my eyes. She pointed to a spot against the wall outside massive double doors and left without speaking. So I stood there, and I waited. The doors burst open 2 hours later. Princess Kyraeth stormed out, and I finally saw her up close. She was taller than most Vraleth, nearly 7 feet, with a warrior's build and scars across her arms that no royal should have. Her skin shifted between violet and deep red, colors I didn't recognize. She wore armor even in the palace, and her hands were wrapped in training tape stained with dried blood, hers or someone else's, I couldn't tell. She stopped when she saw me. Those black eyes locked onto mine, and I felt like I was being weighed and measured and found wanting all in the space of a heartbeat. "You're the human." Her voice was lower than I expected, rough like she'd been shouting for days. "Yes, Your Highness. They sent you to babysit me. They sent me to serve in your guard." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "My guard, as if I need protection." She stepped closer, and I forced myself not to step back. "Now, do you know what happened to the last one?" "He lasted 4 hours. He lasted 4 hours because I was feeling generous." She leaned in, close enough that I could smell ozone and something like cinnamon on her breath. "He displeased me, so I broke his arm in 6 places and threw him through a window. The one before that questioned my orders, so I locked him in the training room and set the drones to maximum aggression. They found him 3 hours later, curled up and whimpering, and the first one..." She smiled, showing teeth too sharp for comfort. "The first one tried to calm me down. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me to breathe. So I broke every finger on that hand, one by one, while he screamed. She was trying to scare me, maybe trying to see if I'd run like all the others. So I looked her in those endless black eyes and said the first true thing I'd thought since arriving at the palace. Sounds like they deserved it." Her smile vanished. The red in her skin deepened to almost black. For a moment, I thought I'd miscalculated, that she'd kill me right there in the hallway, and they'd just assign another poor bastard to take my place. Then her skin flickered, just for an instant, to a pale blue I'd never seen before. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "In what's your name, human?" "Captain James Riker, Earth Colonial Marines, serial number..." "I don't care about your serial number." She turned away, started walking down the corridor. "Keep up, Riker, and don't speak unless I tell you to." I followed her through the palace, and for the first time since my capture, I felt something other than despair. I felt curious. She moved through the palace like a storm, and everyone scattered before her. Servants pressed themselves against walls, nobles ducked into side rooms, even high-ranking military officers found urgent business elsewhere when they saw her coming. The few who couldn't avoid her bowed low and kept their eyes down, their skin shifting to the pale colors of submission and fear. She didn't acknowledge any of them. We passed through halls lined with ancient tapestries depicting Vralith conquests, through chambers where diplomats conducted business in hushed whispers, through gardens where exotic plants grew under artificial sunlight. Everything was beautiful and ordered and completely lifeless. The palace was a monument to control, and Kyraeth moved through it like a wound that wouldn't heal. She led me to a private training room deep in the palace's military wing. The moment the doors closed behind us, she started stripping off her armor, piece by piece, letting it clatter to the floor. Underneath, she wore a tight black bodysuit that showed just how much of her body was scar tissue. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "I apologize, Your Highness." "Don't apologize. Everyone stares." She moved to a weapons rack and selected 2 training blades, short, curved things that hummed with some kind of energy field. "They stare because I'm broken, because I'm everything a Vralith Royal isn't supposed to be." She activated a holographic opponent, and it materialized in the center of the room. A perfect recreation of a Vralith warrior in full combat armor. She attacked it without hesitation, moving with a speed and ferocity that made my own combat training look like a child's game. The hologram defended itself, adapting to her patterns, but she was relentless. She struck high, low, spun and kicked and slashed until the hologram's defenses failed and it flickered out of existence. She immediately activated another, then another. She fought for an hour straight, destroying opponent after opponent, never slowing, never stopping. Sweat soaked her bodysuit. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. Her skin burned so dark it was almost black. But she didn't quit. Finally, she missed a parry. The holographic blade passed through her defense and struck her ribs, a training hit, no real damage, but enough to register as a defeat. The hologram vanished. The room fell silent. Kyraeth stood in the center of the training floor, her chest heaving, staring at nothing. Then she screamed, the same raw, wordless sound I'd heard yesterday, and hurled one of the blades across the room. It buried itself in the wall, still humming. "Your Highness," I started, forgetting she'd told me not to speak. "Shut up." She didn't turn around. "You don't get to see this. You don't get to judge." "I'm not judging." "Everyone judges," her voice cracked. "Everyone watches the angry princess lose control and they think, there she goes again. There's the broken one, the defective heir." She spun to face me, and I saw something in those black eyes I hadn't expected. Pain. Deep, ancient pain that had carved channels through her soul. "Do you know why they gave me a human guard? Do you know what you really are? Expendable. Bait." She walked toward me slowly, deliberately. "You're bait. Because if I kill you, if I lose control one more time and murder a prisoner of war, the Council has the excuse they need to remove me from the line of succession permanently. They can't touch me for killing Vralith. We have protocols, legal protections, family obligations. But killing a human, that's different. That's proof I'm too dangerous to rule." She stopped right in front of me, close enough to kill me with a single movement. "So here's the deal, Captain Riker. You're going to stand there and watch me fall apart day after day until I finally snap and break you in half. And then they'll drag me before the Council, strip away my titles, and lock me in some remote monastery where I can rage at the walls until I die. Everyone wins, except you and me." I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have nodded and stayed quiet and let her believe what she wanted to believe. But I'd spent 6 months as a prisoner. 6 months watching my brothers and sisters die or disappear or break under the weight of defeat. I'd spent 6 months being treated like an animal, like something less than alive, and I was tired of it. So I looked her in those bottomless black eyes and said, "Then I guess I better not break." Her skin flickered again, that same pale blue of confusion. She stared at me like I was speaking a language she'd never heard before. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "I'm not testing you. I'm warning you. Everyone who gets close to me gets hurt. Everyone. It's what I do." "Yeah," I said. "I got that from the broken fingers and the defenestration. But here's the thing, Your Highness, I've been blown up, shot at, stabbed, irradiated, and subjected to about 3 different kinds of psychological warfare. Your empire killed my entire squad and turned me into a prisoner. So if you want to kill me, go ahead. At least I'll die on my feet instead of in some labor camp. But until then, I'm your guard. That's the job. So I'm going to do it." Silence filled the training room. Kyraeth just stared at me, her skin shifting through colors I couldn't read. Finally, she turned away. "Get out," she said softly. "Your Highness, get out." The words came out as a roar, and the walls seemed to shake. "Go back to your quarters, come back tomorrow, and pray to whatever human gods you believe in that I don't decide to make an example of you." I left. I walked back through the palace corridors, past servants who wouldn't meet my eyes, past nobles who looked at me like I was already a corpse. I made it back to my quarters, closed the door, and sat on the bed, my hands shaking with adrenaline I hadn't let myself feel in her presence. I'd survived day 1 somehow, but I knew tomorrow would be worse. The next morning, I found her in the palace archives. She sat alone at a long table surrounded by data tablets, her skin a dull grey that reminded me of ash. She didn't look up when I entered, just gestured vaguely at the wall where I was supposed to stand. I took my position and watched her read. Hours passed. She never moved except to swipe to the next screen. Outside, 3 moons crossed the sky. Inside, the only sound was the soft hum of climate control and the occasional rustle of her movement. Finally, as the light through the tall windows turned orange, she spoke, "Do you know what these are?" I didn't answer, unsure if it was a real question or rhetoric. "Battle records." She looked up, and her eyes were different. No anger now, just emptiness. "Every military engagement the Empire has fought in the last 200 years. I've been reading them since I was 8 years old. Why? Because my father wanted me to understand war before I learned to fear it." She pushed one of the tablets away. "He said a ruler who fears war makes poor decisions. A ruler who understands war makes necessary ones." She stood and walked to the window, her back to me. The light caught the scars on her arms, and I saw they weren't random. They formed patterns, deliberate marks that looked almost like writing. But I was 12 when the Kethren uprising happened. Do you know what that was? No, Your Highness. The Kethrens were a client species, loyal for 6 generations. Then one day, they decided they'd had enough of Vralith rule. They rose up across 4 systems simultaneously, killed every Vralith overseer, burned every embassy, hijacked our ships, and turned them against us. Her skin darkened slightly. My father sent me with the response fleet. Not to fight. I was too young, to watch, to learn. She traced a finger along one of the scars on her forearm. We glassed their homeworld, burned it until nothing lived. Then we went system by system, station by station, and we killed every Kethren we could find. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. They'd broken faith, and the penalty for rebellion is extinction. She finally turned to face me. I watched from the command deck of the Eternal Dawn. I watched the orbital bombardment turn cities into craters. I watched escape pods destroyed before they could reach safety. I watched for 6 days, until there were no more Kethrens to kill. She walked back to the table and sat down hard, like her legs had given out. On the 7th day, my father came to my quarters. He asked me what I'd learned, and I told him the truth. I learned that we're monsters, that everything we say about honor and civilization and order is a lie we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He struck me, not hard, just enough to make his point. Then he said, "That rage you feel, control it, or it will destroy you." She looked at me with those black eyes, and I saw the 12-year-old girl who'd watched genocide and couldn't look away. I've been trying to control it ever since. 15 years of meditation, training, discipline, every technique the Empire has developed over millennia. And it doesn't work. The rage is still there, and it keeps growing, and everyone can see it. They see a broken princess who can't follow the most basic rule of our civilization. Control yourself, or be controlled. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I was an enemy soldier pressed into service as her keeper. I had no wisdom to offer, no comfort to give. But I understood something in that moment. She hadn't told this to her previous guards. She hadn't told anyone, maybe ever. She was telling me because I was temporary, disposable. I'd be dead or gone soon, and the secret would die with me. So I did something stupid. I stepped away from the wall and pulled out a chair across from her. I sat down. Her skin flashed red. I didn't give you permission to sit. I know. I could have you executed for insubordination. You could. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. But you won't, because that would be too quick, and you want me to suffer, right? That's the whole point. She stared at me, and I couldn't read her expression. Then, slowly, the red faded to that same pale blue, confusion. What are you doing, Riker? Honestly, I have no idea. I ran a hand through my hair. Look, I'm not good at this. I'm a soldier. I know how to follow orders and shoot straight and keep my squad alive. I don't know how to be a guard or a servant or whatever this is supposed to be, but I do know what trauma looks like. You think I'm traumatized? Her voice was dangerous. I think you were a kid who saw something terrible and nobody helped you process it. I think they told you to be strong and controlled and perfect. And when you couldn't do that, they told you that you were broken. And I think you've been carrying that weight alone for 15 years. I met her eyes. Am I wrong? The silence stretched so long I thought maybe I'd finally pushed too far. Then she laughed, not the bitter sound from yesterday, but something genuine, if exhausted. You're going to die here, you know that. They'll execute you for this. Probably. But at least I'll die having a conversation instead of standing against a wall like furniture. She shook her head slowly. You're insane. Yeah, well, war does that. Something shifted in her expression. She leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Tell me about your trauma then, if we're sharing. So I did. I told her about Kepler 442, about watching the Valiant break apart under Vralith beam fire, about Martinez ordering us to abandon ship while she stayed at the helm to give us time, about Chen holding the corridor while the rest of us evacuated, her voice over the comm getting fainter and fainter until there was just static. About the weeks after, in the detention facility, wondering every day if I'd be next. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, and she listened without interruption. When I finished, her skin had gone a soft grey-blue, a color I'd never seen on any Vralith. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for what my people did to yours. I mean, not to be a dick, but your empire doesn't seem big on apologies. My empire isn't, but I am. She stood and walked to a wall panel, pressed something, and a section of wall slid open to reveal bottles of liquid in various colors. She pulled out 2 and brought them back to the table. This is Catherine, very old, very expensive, and very illegal for anyone below royal rank to possess. She poured dark blue liquid into 2 small cups. Drink with me. I took the cup. The liquid smelled like metal and flowers. What are we drinking to? To the dead. All of them. She raised her cup. May they forgive us for surviving. We drank. The Catherine burned going down, then settled into a warm numbness that spread through my chest. We sat in silence. 2 soldiers from opposite sides of a war, mourning people who'd never know each other's names. After the third cup, she asked, "Do you hate us?" I thought about it. I hate what happened. I hate that my friends are dead. But you, I gestured at her. You're just as trapped as I am, just in a prettier cage. A cage with windows is still a cage. Exactly. She poured another round. Her movements were slower now, her skin cycling through colors I had no names for. The Kyraeth was strong, and even a Vralith princess wasn't immune to it. Can I tell you something? She didn't wait for an answer. When they told me about you, about the human god, I was glad. I thought finally I'd have an excuse. I'd kill you in a moment of rage, and they'd lock me away, and I wouldn't have to do this anymore. Wouldn't have to pretend I'm fit to rule. Wouldn't have to wear armor every day just to hold myself together. She looked at me with eyes that seemed less black now, almost human. But you won't break, will you? I really don't want to. Why? What's the point? You're a prisoner in an enemy palace, serving a princess who everyone says is insane. Why not just give up? I thought about all the glib answers I could give, about duty and honor and all the things we're supposed to say. Instead, I told her the truth. Because if I give up, then they win. All of them. Everyone who said humans were weak, that we didn't belong among the stars, that we were too violent and chaotic to be trusted. If I break, I prove them right. But if I stand here and take whatever you throw at me and keep standing, I shrugged. And then maybe I prove something else. Maybe I prove we're stronger than they think. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and did something no Vraleth had done since I'd been captured. She touched me. Just her hand on mine. Her skin cool and smooth. Her colors shifted to that pale blue again. "You're very stupid," she said softly. "I've been told, and stubborn, that too. And you're going to get yourself killed, probably." I didn't pull my hand away, but not today. She smiled. It was small and sad, and the first genuine expression I'd seen on her face. "Not today," she agreed. We finished the bottle. By the time the moons had fully crossed the sky, we were both unsteady on our feet. She stood up, swayed slightly, and I reflexively reached out to steady her. She didn't pull away or threaten to break my arm. She just looked at where my hand held her elbow, then back at my face. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not running." She pulled away gently and headed for the door. "Go sleep, Riker. Tomorrow we have diplomatic meetings, and I need you alert. The merchant lords from the Outer Rim are visiting, and they're going to try to arrange a marriage alliance." "A what?" She laughed, bitter again. They want me married off to one of their heirs, a political union to strengthen trade relations. They've been trying for 3 years now. Every 6 months, a new suitor arrives, and every 6 months, I send him running. She looked back at me. "Stay close tomorrow, it's always entertaining." I made it back to my quarters and collapsed on the bed, the room spinning slightly from the Kyraeth. But for the first time since my capture, I felt something other than despair or resignation. I felt like, maybe, possibly, I'd made a connection with someone who understood what it meant to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. I was wrong, of course. What we'd made was so much more complicated than that. The next morning, I reported to her chambers with a headache that felt like someone was conducting orbital bombardment inside my skull. She looked perfectly fine, which seemed deeply unfair. "You look terrible," she observed. "I feel terrible. Good. It builds character." She was in full ceremonial armor now, not the training gear, but the real thing, etched with her family crest and inlaid with something that glowed faintly blue. "Stay close and don't speak unless spoken to. These meetings are tedious, but they're politically necessary. And whatever happens, don't interfere." "What's going to happen?" Her smile was sharp. Depends how stupid the suitor is. The throne room was massive, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. The emperor and empress sat on thrones of what looked like crystallized starlight, their skin the perfect calm blue of absolute authority. Other members of the royal family stood in a semicircle behind them, Kyraeth's brothers and sisters, all of them radiating disapproval when they looked at her. Kyraeth stood apart from them all, and I took position behind her, trying to look like I belonged. The merchant lords entered in a procession of wealth and power, their skin adorned with metallic tattoos that denoted their holdings, their robes worth more than everything I'd ever owned. And with them came the suitor. He was young, probably Kyraeth's age, with the confident bearing of someone who'd never been told no. His skin was a light purple that spoke of good breeding and careful genetics. He bowed to the emperor and empress with practiced grace, then turned to Kyraeth. "Princess Kyraeth, you honor me with your presence." She said nothing. He continued, undeterred. "I am Lord Theraxis of the Theramin Consortium. My family controls the trade routes through 17 systems and owns mineral rights to 43 worlds. We would be honored to unite our house with yours." Still nothing. "I've studied your service record, Your Highness. Your combat achievements are impressive, for a woman." I saw her skin darken, saw her hands clench. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lord Theraxis, oblivious to his impending doom, stepped closer. "With proper guidance, you could become a fitting consort. I would, of course, require you to retire from military service. A wife's place is managing the household, not—" "No," Kyraeth said. "I beg your pardon." I said no. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. "You may leave now." "Princess, surely you don't mean—" "I don't stutter, Lord Theraxis. I said no. This meeting is over." His skin flushed an embarrassed yellow. "Oh, you would dismiss me. Do you know what my family—" She moved so fast I almost missed it. One moment she was standing 5 feet away, the next she had him by the throat, lifted off the ground, his feet dangling. "You called me impressive for a woman," she said conversationally. "You said I needed proper guidance. You told me what my place is." She leaned in close. "Let me show you what this woman can do without guidance. Kyraeth." The Emperor's voice cut through the tension. "Release him." She held Theraxis for another heartbeat, then dropped him. He collapsed, gasping and clutching his throat. His guards moved forward, but the Vraleth Imperial Guards blocked them immediately. This wasn't just an assault, this was a royal reprimand, and interrupting it would be treason. Kyraeth looked down at the wheezing merchant lord. "Tell your father that the next time he sends a suitor to insult me, I'll send that suitor back in pieces. Am I clear?" Theraxis nodded frantically, still unable to speak. "Good. Get out of my sight." They left, Theraxis supported by his retainers, the merchant lords hurrying after them with their skin flashing between yellow embarrassment and red anger. The throne room fell silent. The Emperor stood. "Kyraeth, a word. In private?" She followed him without argument, and I moved to follow, but a guard stopped me with a hand on my chest. "Not you, human." So I stood there, outside the Emperor's private chambers, and I listened to them argue through the door. Not the words, the walls were too thick for that, but the tone. His voice cold and measured, hers rising and falling in waves. At one point, something shattered, and I tensed, ready to force my way in if needed. But then silence. Long, heavy silence. When the door opened, Kyraeth emerged. Her skin was the darkest I'd ever seen it, almost black, but her face was blank. She walked past me without a word, and I followed her back to her chambers. She sealed the door behind us and stood there, back to me, absolutely still. "Your Highness, he's right," she said quietly. My father, he said I'm a liability, an embarrassment. He said that every time I lose control, I make the Empire look weak, that I'm driving away valuable alliances because I can't play the diplomatic game, that I'm everything a Vraleth royal shouldn't be. You defended yourself against an arrogant. I assaulted a visiting dignitary in front of the entire court. She spun to face me, and her eyes were wet. I didn't know Vraleth could cry. He was a pompous idiot, yes, but he was also a test. My father sent him here to see if I could control myself, to see if I could be diplomatic instead of violent, and I failed. Again. She sank onto a bench, her armor suddenly looking too heavy for her to bear. He gave me an ultimatum. Either I accept marriage to someone of his choosing within the next solar cycle, or I abdicate my claim to the throne and retire to the monastery on Wraith 9. Either way, I stop being a problem. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, hollow and broken. Nothing about this is fair. I didn't ask to be born royal. I didn't ask to be broken. I didn't ask for this rage that I can't control no matter how hard I try. But here I am, and I have to live with the consequences. I sat down beside her, and she didn't tell me to leave. For what it's worth, I said, I thought he deserved it. The merchant lord. He was treating you like property. That's what we are, in the end. Pieces to be moved on a board, assets to be traded. My feelings don't matter. My rage doesn't matter. Only the stability of the Empire matters. She leaned back against the wall. Sometimes I think I should just take the monastery. At least there I could rage at the walls and hurt no one but myself. Or, I said slowly, you could tell them all to fuck off. Her head snapped toward me. What? You heard me. Tell them to fuck off. Stop playing by their rules. They say you're broken? Fine. Be broken. Be angry. Be exactly what they're afraid of. Maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's your strength. That's madness. Yeah, well, I grinned. I'm human. Madness is kind of our thing. She stared at me, and I saw something shift in those black eyes. Something like hope, fragile and dangerous. You're serious. Dead serious. Your Highness, I've seen a lot of people break in a lot of different ways. And I've learned that the ones who survive aren't the ones who hide their damage. They're the ones who weaponize it. You want to stop being a victim of your rage? Stop fighting it. Use it. That's the opposite of everything I've been taught. Yeah, but has everything you've been taught actually helped? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she started laughing, really laughing, until tears ran down her face and her skin cycled through a dozen colors I'd never seen. You're going to get me exiled, she said through the laughter. Maybe, but at least you won't be bored. She wiped her eyes, her skin settling into a color somewhere between blue and silver, peaceful, almost content. All right, Captain Riker, let's try it your way. Let's see what happens when the broken princess stops apologizing for being broken. I had no idea what I'd just started. I couldn't have known that my words would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire Empire. But I was about to find out. Everything changed 3 days later, when the Kethran remnant attacked the palace. They shouldn't have existed. The Empire had wiped them out 15 years ago, down to the last child. But some had survived, hidden in asteroid bases and dead zones, breeding and planning and waiting for their moment. And their moment came during the Festival of Stars, when half the Imperial family was gathered for the annual ceremony. The first explosion took out the eastern wing. I was with Kyraeth in the gardens when the shockwave hit, knocking us both down. Alarms screamed through the palace, and through the smoke I saw ships, small, fast, armed with weapons that shouldn't exist in Kethran hands. Raiders, Kyraeth breathed. Then her skin went pure black. No, not raiders. Kethrans. That's impossible. They're extinct. They're here. She was on her feet, running toward the palace. My family is in the ceremonial hall. Move. We ran. The palace had become a war zone, guards rushing past us, servants fleeing, explosions echoing through corridors. Kyraeth commandos had breached the lower levels, and they were fighting their way up with a precision that spoke of years of planning. We found the ceremonial hall in chaos. The Emperor was wounded, his guards forming a defensive perimeter while they tried to evacuate the royal family. Kyraeth's brothers and sisters were being rushed to secure locations, but she pushed through the guards toward her father. "Kyraeth, get to safety," he ordered, blood seeping through his ceremonial robes. "Not without you." "That's not a request, that's an order." He grabbed her arm. "You're third in line. If your brothers fall, you're all that remains of our bloodline. Get to the escape tunnels, now." "Father." A Kyraeth commando burst through the side door. He had time to raise his weapon, time to aim at the Emperor, no time to fire before Kyraeth moved. She hit him like a meteor, her armored fist smashing through his helmet and the skull beneath. She ripped the weapon from his dying hands and turned it on his squad mates as they poured through the door. The weapon roared, and Kyraeth's fell. But there were too many. For every one she killed, 2 more appeared. The Imperial Guards were falling, their weapons inadequate against whatever tech the Kyraeths had developed in their years of hiding. The Emperor was down, unconscious or dead, I couldn't tell. The defensive line was collapsing, and Kyraeth stood at the center of it all, surrounded by enemies, her skin burning darker than midnight, and she was laughing, not the bitter laugh I'd heard before. This was joy, pure, terrible joy. 15 years, she screamed at them. 15 years I've dreamed of this. Come on, let me finish what we started. She dropped the weapon and attacked with her bare hands. I'd seen her train, seen her fight holograms, but this was different. This was her rage unleashed. No control, no restraint, just violence in its purest form. She tore through them like they were paper, and every kill seemed to fuel her further. But even she had limits. A Kyraeth got behind her, raised his weapon. I moved without thinking, putting myself between them, and the shot meant for her hit me in the shoulder. I went down hard, pain exploding through my arm. Kyraeth turned, saw me bleeding, saw the Kyraeth who'd shot me. Her scream shattered windows. What happened next? I only saw in fragments through the pain. She took the Kyraeth apart, literally. Then she took his squad apart. Then she kept going, moving through the palace like death itself, hunting every Kyraeth she could find. Imperial guards tried to stop her, tried to coordinate with her, but she was beyond orders now. She was pure rage made flesh. I managed to get up, my arm useless, blood soaking my uniform. I followed her by the trail of bodies, through corridors, downstairs, into the lower levels where the Kyraeths had breached. Everywhere she went, she killed. No mercy, no hesitation, just as her people had done to theirs 15 years ago. I found her in the main reactor chamber, standing over the last Kyraeth commando. He was wounded, his weapon broken, no way to escape, and she had her hands around his throat, lifting him, her skin so dark it seemed to absorb light. "Kyraeth," I said. My voice sounded weak even to me. She didn't turn. "Stay back, Riker. You need to stop." "Why?" She squeezed harder. The Kyraeth choked. "They came here to kill us, to finish what they started. Why should I show mercy?" "Because you're not doing this for justice." I took a step closer, my vision swimming. "You're doing it because you're angry about what you saw 15 years ago. Because you've wanted someone to blame for all that rage, and now you have them." "So what if I am?" She still hadn't looked at me. "They deserve this. They deserve worse than this." "Maybe they do." I was close enough to touch her now. "But you don't. You don't deserve to become the thing you hate. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I put my hand on her arm, the one holding the Kyraeth. I understand that you're terrified, that you've spent 15 years trying to be perfect and controlled because you're afraid of what you'll become if you let go. And now you've let go. And it's everything you feared. You're the monster they said you were. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were black holes, empty and infinite. You're hurt. Yeah, caught a shot meant for you. Probably should see a medic soon. I smiled, tasted blood. But first, you need to put him down. They killed people. My people. I know. And they should face justice. Real justice, not this. I squeezed her arm gently. You told me once that everyone who gets close to you gets hurt. But I'm still here. Still standing. And I'm asking you stop. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't. Thought she'd kill him and then me and then everyone else until someone finally stopped her. But then her grip loosened. The Kyraeth fell, gasping and alive. She caught me as my legs gave out. Riker, stay with me. Not going anywhere. The world was getting darker. See? Didn't break. Told you. You absolute idiot, her voice cracked. You jumped in front of an energy weapon for me. Yeah, well, that's the job, right? Protect the princess. I laughed, coughed. Besides, someone has to stop you from doing something stupid. Her skin was cycling through colors so fast I couldn't track them. Don't you dare die. That's an order. Trying not to. Darkness pulled at me. Kyraeth. What? You're not broken. You're just angry. And that's okay. Then the darkness took me, and I knew nothing more. I woke up 3 days later in the medical wing. The healers told me I'd lost enough blood to kill 2 humans, that the energy weapon had cooked my shoulder down to the bone, that I was lucky to be alive. They didn't tell me what happened after I passed out, but I heard it from the guards. Kyraeth had carried me through the palace, screaming for healers, threatening anyone who moved too slowly. She'd stayed with me through the first surgery, then the second, pacing like a caged animal while they put me back together. She'd executed the surviving Kyraeth commando personally, in front of the entire court, because he'd shot her guard. Not a human, not a prisoner, her guard. When I was finally cleared for visitors, she was the first through the door. She looked different. Her skin a calm blue-grey I'd never seen, her armor polished but not ceremonial. She sat in the chair beside my bed and just looked at me. Hey, I said. My voice was rough. Hey. She reached out and took my hand, the one that still worked. You're an idiot. You mentioned that. You could have died, but I didn't. Only because I carried you to the healers fast enough. Her grip tightened. Do you have any idea what you did? You jumped in front of a weapon for me. Why? Because I tried to find the right words. Because everyone else runs from you. Everyone else is afraid of your rage, your damage, your broken pieces. But I'm not. I see who you are under all that, and she's worth protecting. Her eyes went wide. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, the council met yesterday. They wanted to exile me for what I did during the attack, for losing control, for executing the Kyraeth in front of witnesses. My father argued for me, but he was outvoted. She paused. Then something unexpected happened. What? Commander Velrith testified. He said that yes, I'd lost control, but he also said that I'd saved lives. That my rage, unchecked as it was, had broken the Kyraeth advance and saved the Emperor and most of the royal family. He said that maybe the Empire had been wrong. Maybe we don't need another controlled, logical heir. Maybe we need something different. She stood and walked to the window. They reversed their decision. I'm still in the line of succession, but there were conditions. I have to continue with my guard detail, and... She looked back at me. They're transferring you to permanent assignment as my personal guard, not as a prisoner, as a member of the palace staff, full rights and privileges. I stared at her. Oh, they're giving me freedom. More than that. They're giving you citizenship. The council declared that any human who saved a member of the royal family deserves to be treated as Vraleth. It's unprecedented, but... She smiled. I may have threatened to burn down the council chambers if they refused. You didn't. I absolutely did. She came back to the bed and sat on the edge. You were right, Riker. I was fighting the wrong battle. I was trying to be something I'm not. Controlled, perfect, cold. But that's not me. It never was. I'm angry and broken and difficult, and maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's just who I am. She took my hand again, and this time her skin shifted to a color I'd never seen on any Vraleth, warm gold, like sunlight. The suitors can come and go, let them run from the angry princess. I don't need someone who fears my rage. Her black eyes met mine. And I need someone who stands in front of weapons for me, someone who calls me on my bullshit and drinks Catherine with me and sits beside me when I'm falling apart, someone who doesn't run. Someone like me. My heart was pounding, and it had nothing to do with the injuries. Exactly like you. She leaned in close. So here's the question. Captain Riker, are you staying? I thought about Earth, about the home I'd left behind. About my fallen squad and the war we'd lost. About everything I'd been through to end up here, in this moment, with this impossible, magnificent, broken woman asking if I'd stay. Yeah, I said. I'm staying. She kissed me then, and her skin blazed gold and silver and blue all at once. When she pulled back, she was smiling, really smiling, open and free and without fear. Good. Because I have plans, and I'm going to need someone to stop me when I go too far. That's a full-time job, Your Highness. I know. She stood up. Rest, heal, and when you're back on your feet, we're going to change some things around here, starting with how the Empire treats its rage. She left, and I lay there in the medical bed, grinning like an idiot despite the pain. The healers came by and asked if I needed more medication, and I said no. I needed to feel this. All of it. The pain and the joy and the crazy, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd found something worth fighting for in the heart of an enemy empire. 3 months later, I stood beside her in the throne room as she formally rejected every suitor the council sent her way. They'd learned to expect it by now. Learned that Princess Kyraeth would not be controlled, would not be married off for political convenience, would not be anything other than exactly who she was. And I learned that the human guard who'd survived every test, every threat, every moment of her rage had become something more than a guard. I'd become her anchor, her balance. The one person in the entire empire who could stand in the storm of her fury and not be swept away. The other nobles still whispered about the broken princess and her human companion. Let them. We had more important things to worry about, like the Catherine remnant cells still hiding in the outer systems, like the political reforms Kyraeth was pushing through the council, like the slowly growing understanding that maybe rage wasn't weakness after all. Maybe it was power that had been mislabeled for thousands of years. Years later, when Kyraeth took the throne after her father's peaceful passing, the Empire didn't know what to make of the angry princess who'd become the angry empress. But they learned. She ruled with a firm hand and a fierce heart, and beside her stood a human who'd learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not run away. The suitors had all fled, every single one of them, terrified of her rage and her fire and her refusal to be anything other than herself. But I stayed. I stood beside her when she raged and when she laughed, when she made decisions that shocked the council and when she showed mercy that surprised them even more. I held her when the weight of the crown became too much, and she held me when memories of the war came back in dreams. We were broken, both of us, damaged by wars and losses and choices we couldn't take back. But maybe broken things can still fit together. Maybe two people with jagged edges can find a way to stand side by side without cutting each other to pieces. The historians will probably write that the empire changed when Empress Kyraeth took the throne, that her reign marked a shift from cold logic to passionate justice, from calculated control to controlled chaos. They'll analyze and theorize and argue about what it all means. But I know the truth. The empire changed the day a princess stopped apologizing for her rage and a human soldier stopped running from it. Everything else was just details. And in the end, that's all that matters. Not that I survived, not that she ruled, but that we found each other in the middle of all that pain and anger and fear, and we decided that broken was beautiful, rage was power, and love was worth standing your ground for, even when everyone else runs away. Especially then,